Hello everyone. Welcome to a new part of What If Deku Had a Stand. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really helps motivates me to make more. I did not write this story. The writer is Dace the Elderly Tripper. Please check them out. Now let's dive in. Kanoko had always been someone who preferred not to interfere in the private lives of others. This tendency had been present throughout her life, even in middle school. She paid little attention to the various rumors that circulated around the school. This was not necessarily a conscious decision, rather it seemed that she was paid little attention in return. This feeling of being overlooked or underestimated may have contributed to her lack of interest in delving into the affairs of others. As the echo of loud cries and screams reached Kanoko's ears, she found herself in a moment of indecision. The instinct to drop the non-poisonous berries she had picked and quickly retreat to the safety of Ojiro's presence was incredibly tempting. After all, it seemed the most logical decision to seek refuge with her teammate in the face of potential danger. But a strange force held her back and prevented her from turning away immediately. It was as if an invisible hand was holding her in place and urging her on a different path. Despite the lure of safety, Kanoko felt an unexpected wave of curiosity rise within her. Perhaps it was the novelty of the situation or the desire to break out of her usual caution. At that moment, a hint of courage flared up in Kanoko, even if it felt ill-planned and ill-considered. With a mixture of trepidation and determination, she decided to face the unknown rather than hide from it. Step by step she ventured closer to the source of the turmoil, her heart racing with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. She didn't know what to expect when she stumbled across the noisy situation and watched a teenager with silver hair fight against another girl. But what surprised her was that both sides were wearing headbands. She briefly considered waiting to take advantage of the situation, but then remembered that she couldn't wear a headband, and she wasn't confident that she could beat either of them alone, even if they were tired. The guy could turn his body into steel, which would hit him really hard. Even without his quirk, he could probably knock her out with one punch. And the girl, though she didn't look as strong as the guy, used her quirk to break her body into smaller pieces that she presumably could control with her mind. She used her levitating hands and feet to confuse and beat the other guy. None of that mattered, because just as the silver-haired man was about to deliver a decisive blow, 3 more people came out of the forest and entered the clearing where the two were fighting. The fighters immediately turned their attention to the newcomers. What followed was a striking shift in the balance of fairness. The girl and the boy reluctantly joined forces and decided not to attack each other for the time being. The trio that had just arrived, however, showed remarkable teamwork. A mutant with green hair and blade-like appendages growing from his body attacked the silver-haired boy relentlessly, forcing him to constantly use his own quirk to avoid being cut to pieces. The other girl found herself cornered by the duo. She did try to escape by splitting herself into smaller pieces, but her efforts were quickly thwarted when one of her attackers enlarged his hands and swatted the airborne pieces like pesky flies. After one opponent went down, attention quickly shifted and a colossal fist slammed into the steel-skinned man's back, hurling him against a tree and knocking him unconscious. The attackers might have successfully seized their headbands had it not been for the sudden appearance of a brown-haired girl who intervened and stopped them. Kanoko looked behind her and saw only darkness and trees. A sigh of relief escaped her, knowing that no one would ambush her from that direction. What really surprised her, however, was that the attackers had disappeared when she turned her gaze back. The broken path with the destroyed vegetation remained, but the people themselves had seemingly vanished into thin air. Emerging from her hiding place, Kanoko carefully scanned the surroundings and found it disconcerting that the attackers had seemingly vanished into thin air. There you are. Her heart skipped a beat, and her gaze darted to the source of the voice. Another figure stood before her, a bird-like head with dark feathers staring directly at her. He was dressed in a simple black t-shirt and matching trousers, had a hood tied around his waist and his boots were firmly anchored in the earth beneath him. Although Kanoko struggled to place the voice, only a sense of fear dominated her thoughts and overshadowed any attempt to recognize it. So you didn't have a headband," he remarked with a hint of disappointment. At last Kanoko made the connection. With a trembling finger, she pointed at him, her voice shaking. "You're the one who's been chasing us." Observant, he confirmed with a hint of sarcasm. "A quality both valuable and uncommon in most people I have met. Fumikage Tokoyami," he introduced himself. Before Kanoko could say anything back, a shadowy figure emerged from Fumikage's belly, expanding and becoming a black figure. Its head resembled Fumikage's, with claw-like hands, and its lower part remaining connected to fumigage. Fumi, the apparition, whined childishly. Stop pretending to be so cool and get to the point. Its voice had a pleading tone, as if it had heard Tokoyami's speech countless times before. Enough, Dark Shadow, came the reply. Our opponent hasn't even introduced herself yet. That didn't stop you from attacking them earlier, it retorted angrily, provoking a response from the boy. Need I remind you that we chased them away because you insisted? He glared at Dark Shadow, daring it to deny his words. Ugh, he conceded. Fine, do what you want, but hurry up. With that, he retreated into fumigage and gave a final wave to the still motionless Kanoko. Apologize, Dark Shadow acts independently, he said, addressing her. Kanoko remained silent, unsure how to respond. It didn't seem to bother him and he continued speaking without waiting for her reply. I must also apologize. Going after you and your teammate was unwarranted. Speaking of your teammate, where is he? He asked. Kanoko remained frozen, unable to answer because she was shocked. The silence stretched on, making Tokoyami increasingly uneasy. He wasn't sure if the unease was coming from him or from her. No need to worry, she managed to say, finally regaining her voice after processing the information Tokoyami had just shared. His nod of acknowledgement helped dispel the uneasy feeling that had settled between them. Tokoyami then asked another question, are you in a team? Or just a duo, perhaps with an opening? Sorry, she stammered, still uncertain, we're already full. She replied, unsure of how he would react to the news. A shame, he sighed before turning around. Nevertheless, I wish. Before he could finish, Dark Shadow reappeared. Are we done? It asked, its voice tinged with exhaustion. Yes, we're done, Tokoyami replied curtly, the slight increase in his tone betraying his frustration. Farewell. He continued walking back in the direction he had come from. Oh, what do we have here? A new voice spoke up, causing Kanoko to instinctively back up in the direction of Tokoyami, who had also turned around to face the newcomers. Or rather, two figures emerged from the forest into the clearing, one of them slightly hunched over in posture. The person in front was of average height, with short blonde hair neatly combed to the right, causing his bangs to hang over his right eye. His eyes were periwinkle blue with white pupils, slanting downwards towards the sides of his face. His eyes were half closed, and he had a smirk and a head tilt that gave him a somewhat disdainful appearance, wearing an open jeans jacket and matching shorts that completed his outfit. One headband was on his head, one tied to his right arm. The other person didn't seem to pay them much attention, giving only a brief side glance before appearing more interested in the grass. This boy, also of average height, had small eyebrows and red eyes. His slightly open mouth revealed sharp teeth, forming what looked like an expression of displeasure. Most notably, his red hair was spiked in various directions, giving him a striking appearance. He wore a red tracksuit, which Kanoko thought was a bit too much red, and paired it with white shoes, giving him a somewhat intimidating look. Two headbands were tied to his left arm and one to his right. Come on, Monoma, they don't even have headbands, the red-haired boy spoke, shooting a glance at his partner. Monoma, now known by the name he had given them, visibly winced. You know, Kirishima, I do wonder if you're really aiming to win this exam, Monoma retorted, giving his own defiant look despite their similar heights. Who are both of you? A voice beside Kanoko inquired, causing her to jump slightly and turn to find Tokoyami now standing next to her. More importantly, what do you want from us? The two arguing teens stopped their squabble and shifted their attention back to the pair. I'm Nido Monoma, and this is my current partner, Eijiro Kirishima. The blonde introduced, gesturing to himself and his companion. We don't really want anything from you, except perhaps a kind request for you to step down from the exams, he stated matter-of-factly. This time, both Kanoko and Tokoyami displayed outward expressions of displeasure, their brows furrowing. And why should we do that? Tokoyami inquired further. As you may have heard from Present Mike during the question round of his explanation, even if you manage to acquire the required number of headbands, 2 in our case, there's still a chance that we might not pass, Monoma explained. Kirishima let out a sigh, and both Kanoko and Tokoyami grasped the direction he was headed. But if many participants were to withdraw from the exams, the chances of being accepted with the required amount to even be considered passing would increase, he elaborated. His gaze was primarily on Tokoyami. Surely, you can deduce where I'm going with this. I can, Tokoyami replied succinctly, his gaze shifting towards Kanoko. She could read the determination in his eyes. It was evident that he had no intention of giving up, He had come too far for that. He seemed to be gauging her own resolve, silently seeking to know if she stood by his side or not. If Kanoko were on her own, she might have considered accepting Monoma's request. She could have found a reason to withdraw from the exams, perhaps feeling disheartened and potentially disappointing her family, but at least she'd have a reason. However, she knew that she couldn't face this challenge alone, not with her quirk or her skills. She simply couldn't do it alone. And that's why she nodded. Her nod was directed at Fumikage, a silent acknowledgement of her decision. She couldn't go through with it on her own, but she wasn't alone. She couldn't abandon her team, especially after they had put their trust in her. She couldn't leave them behind. That's why she nodded. I understand. Monoma sighed, not requiring verbal confirmation of their decision. He knew that many people placed great value on words, despite the old saying that action spoke louder. He found himself in a similar mindset. Opinions were one thing, people could express them and receive praise, but standing firm behind those opinions when the going got tough was what truly mattered. That's why he wasted no time in sprinting towards them, aiming to swiftly incapacitate both of them so that the nurse bot could attend to them, hopefully without causing any injuries. Kirishima followed closely behind Monoma, just a split second slower in his reaction. Monoma inwardly clicked his tongue. His partner still needed to refine his observational skills if he hadn't noticed the determination in their opponent's eyes, a determination that left no room for surrender. However, such details hardly mattered in the grand scheme of things. Kirishima's quirk was more than adequate for the task at hand, sufficient for both of them, especially after his generous offer to allow him to freely copy it during the exams, a gesture Monoma reassured clearly applied only for the duration of the exams. Observing the slight smudges of dirt on their clothes and bodies, Monoma deduced that they hadn't engaged in combat yet. This suggested an affiliation between them. It made sense to pair someone with a potent offensive quirk with another who had a supportive one. The brown-haired girl seemed more inclined toward support, while the mutant teen appeared to be a formidable physical combatant. He was proven correct as a black entity emerged from the boy's abdomen, intercepting Monoma's intended attack against the girl. Monoma scrutinized the dark appendage and discerned distinct claws at one end. A summoning-type quirk, he mused, a genuine spark of intrigue lighting up his eyes. He had a soft spot for quirks he couldn't copy, there was something uniquely captivating about them. His intrigue quickly transformed into excitement as the claws shifted and took aim at him. Fortunately, the new quirk he had recently copied seemed tailor-made for this very situation. He mimicked the hand gesture he had observed from the previous user, forming his hands into a square shape and taking a deep breath. As he exhaled forcefully through the square, the air surrounding it began to shimmer and expand, growing larger in response to his breath until an invisible barrier materialized. Monoma knelt on one knee, taking in deep breaths as he recovered from the exertion. Now I understand why he lost, he admitted with a wry smile, recognizing that his limited mastery of newly copied quirks was likely a contributing factor. Given the constraints of his copied quirk, Monoma concluded that its original user could probably create no more than 5 constructs in an hour. His control over the newly copied quirk was swiftly put to the test as the approaching hand crashed forcefully into the invisible wall he had conjured. The impact generated a resounding sound and halted the attack momentarily. However, it didn't take long for the wall to display signs of stress, developing cracks that expanded until it ultimately shattered. Monoma had anticipated this outcome and swiftly stepped a few meters away as a contingency plan. Meanwhile, Kirishima was on the offensive, opting to engage Tokoyami instead of the girl. Fumikage quickly seized the opportunity to question Komori about her quirk, as her initial shock from the surprise attack began to wane. "What's your quirk?" Fumikage inquired urgently. Komori, still recovering from the ambush, took a moment to respond, her voice somewhat shaky. "I can emit spores that rapidly grow into mushrooms. However, I can't control their precise placement." She trailed off, her tone carrying a hint of regret as she acknowledged the limitations of her ability more than ever. "We'll adapt and use it to our advantage," Fumikage decided, quickly formulating a strategy based on her quirk's capabilities. As his sprint continued, Kirishima found himself reflecting on his decision to ally with Monoma. He couldn't help but admit that joining forces with him might not have been the wisest choice. He had grown increasingly disheartened by their tactics, which he likened to tax collectors crushing the spirits of others for their own benefit. Monoma's argument was that not everyone they had encountered had surrendered willingly and fought. Still, Kirishima couldn't shake the feeling that their approach was unjust, especially when he considered the unwavering determination of those who resisted. He remembered Monoma's earlier advice about actions speaking louder than words, particularly in relation to his straightforward fighting style and planning. Kirishima couldn't help it, he wasn't much of a thinker in the first place, and in the fights they were engaged in, instincts took over him mostly. Monoma's sincere admiration for Kirishima became evident through his words. His repeated use of the term manly, something he quickly understood resonated with Kirishima, carried genuine meaning. Monoma recognized the strength in Kirishima's unwavering determination, his resolute stance against opponents, and his steadfast belief in his own ideals. The notion of being manly extended beyond mere bravado. It symbolized a deep commitment to one's beliefs and values, even when faced with adversity. Kirishima found resonance in Monoma's perspective of it. After all, every participant in this exam was striving to prove their worthiness of becoming heroes. Their beliefs were put to the test in this clash, and their determination to fight for those beliefs was a testament to their true heroic spirit. For Kirishima, the decision to stay and face the challenge head-on wasn't just a matter of passing the exam. It was about honoring his convictions and proving to himself that he was capable of standing his ground in the face of opposition. This understanding fueled his resolve to continue fighting, guided by the trust he had placed in Monoma's guidance. That's why he stayed, and that's why when Monoma yelled to dodge to the right where the giant hand was coming at him, he didn't hesitate a second. He trusted him. Tokoyami's surprise was obvious as he watched the course of events. The calculated risk Kirishima took under Monoma's guidance showed a level of confidence that amazed Tokoyami. The fact that Kirishima had thrown himself into danger without hesitation, based solely on Monoma's instruction, indicated a strong bond between the two that went beyond mere cooperation. In contrast, Kanoko's confusion was palpable. Unfamiliar with combat tactics, she found it difficult to understand the reasons behind Kirishima's actions. The thought of deliberately putting herself in danger, even under the guise of a strategic move, troubled her. "Komori, you need to run behind Dark Shadow's attack," Tokoyami's voice cut through the tense air. Kanoko's gaze flicked towards him, hoping this was a joke. Her mind raced as she processed the situation. The directive seemed counterintuitive, moving towards the threat rather than away from it. But Tokoyami's plea for trust convinced her, pushing her past her initial confusion. She took a deep breath, drawing strength from his unwavering gaze. With a determined nod, Kanoko's uncertainty transformed into resolve. She began to move, her initial steps cautious as she processed the risk. Monoma's mind raced as he watched Kanoko's unexpected movement. Her decision to follow Tokoyami's instruction threw him off balance for a moment. Had his plan been too transparent? He knew his opponents were not stupid, they would not fall for a simple diversion so easily. But Monoma was no fool either. He had encountered his fair share of naive opponents during the chaotic start of the exams, when the park had become a living illustration of the concept of free for all. None of them would have guessed that Monoma had a carefully calculated strategy at play. As he watched Kanoko's progress, several scenarios ran through Monoma's mind. If she indeed had a support quirk, then her behavior could have deeper implications. Was she trying to bait him with an attack while Tokoyami prepared a counterattack? Or maybe her quirk had an unexpected offensive ability that could surprise them. Not that it mattered much at this point, because it was clear that the other teenager had seen through his plan. They were well aware that Monoma was pursuing a strategy, and it seemed that their own countermove was already in motion. Monoma's grin only widened at this realization. The challenge of the situation only fueled his determination. He looked forward to the thought that their victory would be all the more satisfying knowing that he had successfully outwitted their opponents. It didn't take long for them to get into action, Kanoko upon stopping her sprint activating her quirk, sprouting mushrooms everywhere. Upon witnessing the girl's quirk in action, Monoma raised an intrigued brow. Initially, he couldn't fathom its combat or supportive potential. However, his perspective shifted as he noticed mushrooms sprouting on Kirishima's hand. Monoma's urgent shout prompted everyone to retreat immediately. The timing proved unfortunate, as Kirishima's attempt to withdraw was met with a powerful swipe from Dark Shadow. The impact sent him hurtling into a nearby tree that splintered into two upon impact. Monoma wasted no time, seizing the moment that presented itself. Capitalizing on the shock visible on the faces of their adversaries, he charged at Tokoyami and Kanoko. Both were too preoccupied, Tokoyami by the unintentional surge of force and Kanoko by Kirishima's unexpected recovery, standing tall as if the incident hadn't affected him. However, that illusion shattered as soon as he brought a hand to rub his sore neck. Man, that one got me good, huh? He wasted no time, not allowing his enemy to ponder, before charging in once more. Monoma had anticipated this reaction, knowing that his survival despite serious injuries would shock his opponents. It was a fleeting opportunity, providing a brief moment of bewilderment as the enemy saw him unscathed by their attack. Though such tactics wouldn't suffice against stronger adversaries, it was enough to divert Tokoyami's attention momentarily. The sound of Kanoko's squeak brought him back to reality, his focus shifting to her presence. In that split second, Monoma closed in on her. Reflexively, Tokoyami dispatched Dark Shadow, knowing a barrier was inadequate against Dark Shadow's assault. To his surprise, the blonde had already formed his hands into a mock square, pretending to erect a protective shield. In the end, Monoma's deception came true as he was slammed into another tree. This time, the impact didn't shatter the tree upon contact, yet it must have inflicted considerable pain. Similar to Kirishima's earlier resilience, Monoma rose to his feet once more, displaying an impudent smirk as if the prior events had no impact on him. Before Tokoyami could react, a searing pain in his side caused him to stagger, followed by a punch to his gut that compelled him to recall Dark Shadow. Kirishima had closed the distance yet again, delivering 2 forceful blows. Much to his astonishment, Kirishima abruptly ceased his assault and retreated, vanishing into the deeper forest. Tokoyami eyed the area before sprinting directly at Monoma, Dark Shadow re-emerging. Kanoko, still overwhelmed by the unfolding chaos, could only watch in further bewilderment as Monoma gestured with a finger gun, taking aim directly at Tokoyami. Bang! Tokoyami felt as if a speeding car had collided with him, causing him to involuntarily spit out saliva before being propelled by what seemed like an unseen force deeper into the forest where Kirishima lay in wait. Kanoko felt dread welling up as she watched Tokoyami being effortlessly flung backward by Monoma's single phrase. Had he merely been toying with them all along? Tisk, tsk, tsk, Monoma chided, observing Kanoko's despondent expression. Stiffening, Kanoko found herself at a loss for how to proceed. She hadn't signed up for the exams with the intention of fighting, let alone hurting anyone. She didn't want any of this. Why? Monoma's voice cut through the tension, his gaze laser-focused on her with a trace of venom. Why are you here? Uncertainty gripped her. Was he inquiring about her presence in the forest? About fighting him? Or perhaps about her motivations for becoming a hero? Why would you want to become a hero? He belittled the "you" in his question, causing something deep within Kanoko to tremble. She struggled to find an answer. Monoma pressed on, seemingly unperturbed by her hesitation. I've observed your lot, he said with a sickened expression, as if the thought disgusted him. Motivated by money, fame, status, or some noble aspiration of saving people. He spat on the ground and took a step forward, prompting Kanoko to instinctively step back. But you're different, aren't you? His tone dripped with condescension. You're not here out of your own conviction, are you? You're not here because you made a resolute decision to become a hero and save people, or even for personal gain. One step forward, and Kanoko mirrored it with one step back. You're doomed to fail, all of you. I can tell you that now. Kirishima isn't here. Do you know why you're so weak? Why I could have easily defeated you from the start but chose to chat instead? His question was laced with cynicism, as though he already knew her answer would be no. One step forward, followed by one step back. Because you're consumed by the thoughts of others, he declared matter-of-factly. Your entire focus is on appeasing others, first your peers, and now even me. Is that not your mentality? His smug smile persisted. It's noble, but it's foolish. Such a mindset won't lead you anywhere. You won't win this fight, this exam, or bring honor to your team or whoever's responsible for your presence here. One step forward. Make him stop. I can see it, a local hero saves an orphan, only to die in action. He spread his arms wide. The same villain later sets fire to the orphanage. All of it could have been prevented if only you were more selfish. One step forward. Make him stop. This isn't a battle you can win. You're weak-willed and physically frail. When you obsess over others, you neglect yourself. In this world, neglecting yourself leads to nowhere. One step forward, and now he stood beside her. Really, you should just make him stop. Make him stop. Why am I here? Make him stop. Make him stop. Why am I here? Make him stop. Make him stop. Why me? Why always me? Make him stop. Make him stop. I'm so useless. Make him stop. Make him stop. Make him stop. Are you alright? It was just a question. A simple, everyday question that usually wouldn't raise an eyebrow. But something within her stirred. Monoma's ranting continued, but Kanoko no longer heard. Are you alright? It echoed again, resonating within her. Something was stirring. Why was she here? How could someone with a seemingly useless quirk be part of this? Fighting? Becoming a hero? With a power as ordinary as growing mushrooms? Her family? Pressuring her to try to join clubs, to try to ask girls for playdates, to try to. Her friends? One name emerged, then another, but neither felt right. No one else came to mind. Are you alright? The question rang louder now, a profound whisper. Her team? Was it pride for her team? Being sought after to join? Manga, merely exchanging names. Midoriya, looking at anything but her. Mashireo. Komori. A loud voice jolted her out of her thoughts. Beside her, Ojiro was seated, the bus still stationary with about 3 minutes left before departure. As she glanced at him, she noticed a look of concern etched onto his face. Are you alright? It seemed more like a polite formality, a question asked in passing, as he already scanned her for any signs of injury. Embarrassment tinged her cheeks. Here Ojiro was, genuinely serious about everything, while she... You know, I'm glad we're going to the site together, he stated warmly, his gaze steady on her. Her blush faded instantly, her attention drawn by the genuine smile on his face. I didn't want to come across as a nervous wreck back there, he continued playfully. Someone had to look like they had all their stuff together, right? His laughter was light, and she tried to recall the interactions they'd had during their break. The moments in the cafeteria seemed somewhat hazy now, mostly remembered as Fukadashi's barrage of questions directed at Midoriya about his quirk, answered with Midoriya's enthusiasm, and Midoriya's own questioning. But as the break progressed, the cafeteria had gradually grown quieter, conversations becoming sparse until the last 10 minutes of the exam, where an oppressive silence hung in the air. Fukadashi's boundless energy appeared to reach its peak, evidenced by the 10th time he stirred his tea. Midoriya didn't fare much better, his nervous glances and muttering indicating his unease. Amidst all this, only Ojiro's smile seemed unwavering, as if he understood what was on everyone's minds. Stop it, you two. You're going to make Komori nervous too if you keep this up, Ojiro remarked, causing Kanoko's cheeks to redden unexpectedly at the sudden attention. Oh? Sorry, Komori, Fukadashi awkwardly apologized. Ojiro chuckled softly, an action that provoked mock anger from Fukadashi, triggering an apparent tussle between them. In response, Midoriya, perceiving Fukadashi's actions as genuine anger, tried to stop Fukadashi, igniting a situation where Ojiro laughed heartily, another boy attempting to strangle him, and Midoriya trying desperately to explain why being a jerk wouldn't hold up as a valid courtroom argument. In the midst of it all, Kanoko couldn't help but let out a small laugh, unaware of the subtle widening of Ojiro's grin. Heh, yeah, Ojiro's voice echoed, snapping her back into the present. As she realized she had audibly chuckled while reminiscing, she quickly averted her gaze, cheeks tinged with a hint of embarrassment. You know, at first, I didn't want to become a hero, Ojiro continued, seemingly undisturbed by her reaction. His response prompted her to look at him once more. It's true, he affirmed, recognizing the doubt in her eyes. I actually wanted to be a martial arts teacher at first. I mean. He scratched his neck with an embarrassed smile. What could I do with this quirk? He gestured toward his tail. I thought, who would want to see a hero with such a lame quirk? Why bother trying? He went on, and Kanoko nearly wanted to interrupt, rejecting the notion that his quirk was anything but amazing. It was useful, strong even, judging by Midoriya's praise. It was far better than. But then Izuku came along. He reminisced with a fond smile. He bombarded me with questions over pizza. How much weight could I lift with it? How precise was my control? Could I spin it fast enough to fly? He chuckled good-naturedly. I'm not entirely certain what changed within me that day. Just a random day, like any other, Izuku's talk about wanting to become a hero. His gaze turned distant, filled with a hint of sadness. Something shifted, I guess, something that tested my resolve. Her throat felt dry. There was an undeniable captivation in his story, as if his words were reaching out for her soul, waiting for her acceptance. What happened? She inquired, her voice just above a whisper. My original resolve shattered, he stated simply, causing Kanoko to gasp softly. And a new one took its place. His eyes locked onto hers once more, intensifying the sensation from before. My dream of becoming a teacher crumbled because a stronger resolve found its way into my heart, and it's remained steadfast ever since. I don't know if it was Izuku's talking or if it was my childish hope of becoming a hero coming back that day full force, but determination radiated from his expression. I will become a hero. He smiled earnestly at her. She found herself thinking it was really nice. It was the same sensation she experienced back then, when Ojiro spoke to her and shared a piece of himself. He shared it with me. At the moment, she didn't comprehend the nature of the feeling. Something stirred beneath her skin, surging toward her right arm. This was a new sensation, akin to a constant push, as if the wind guided her while sailing. It resembled an invisible crowd, a chorus of cheers urging her on, akin to someone's unwavering belief in her. The sensation extended to her fingers, a foreign presence settling within. Kanoko recognized Ojiro's gift now. He had entrusted her with one of the most significant things she had lacked, something she hadn't needed before, hadn't known how it felt. Her fingernails elongated, growing swiftly and unexpectedly sharp, strikingly so. His resolve. But I doubt. Monoma's eyes widened, and he promptly tapped into Kirishima's quirk. In a fraction of a second, his skin toughened and turned stone-like, barely in time to shield against the sharp force that tore at his back before he jumped away. A hidden weapon? An aspect of her quirk he hadn't anticipated? What was this familiar sensation emanating from her? His focus snapped back to her, aghast at the sight before him. The girl, who had initially seemed mushroom-like due to her quirk, was no longer the same. Claws sprouted where fingernails should be, obsidian and hardened like bone. Her lips, once quivering with an inverted smile, twisted grotesquely. The edges of her mouth crumbled away like parched, decaying skin, forming a chillingly wider grin. Yet, most strikingly, her tail emerged from her form, mirroring her attire's hue, extending longer and longer the more he gazed. Her hair seemed to part like opposing magnets, unveiling one of her eyes, vertical, with a feral intensity he hadn't seen from her before. Tokoyami found himself dumbfounded by the astonishing durability displayed by his adversary. He counted 16 times now, when Dark Shadow had dealt powerful blows that should have sent Kirishima reeling, only to see the boy rise time and time again. Unsurprisingly, Kirishima was on his feet once more, yet Tokoyami's response was more of an expectant nod than genuine surprise. And then, like a repetitive cycle, his opponent stood tall yet again. "Man, you hit pretty hard," Kirishima remarked, his hand rubbing his neck in a gesture that appeared to mock pain. Though Tokoyami outwardly maintained his calm demeanor, a hint of annoyance simmered beneath the surface. His frustration was particularly pronounced because of Dark Shadow. Patience wasn't his forte, and any semblance of patience attributed to him was solely due to his unwavering willpower. And it was that very willpower that was steadily eroding away. Kirishima charged forward once more, but something beyond unwavering determination seemed to flicker in his expression this time, worry. And that very same emotion crept onto Tokoyami's own face, shrouded beneath a carefully composed, judgmental gaze. How long had this relentless battle persisted? How many times had he sent Kirishima hurtling into the forest, only for the boy to rise yet again, propelled even deeper into the shadows? Concern for his temporary ally gnawed at him. Based on their brief interactions, he gathered that she wasn't a fighter, nor did she possess any distinct specialization. In stark contrast, Monoma displayed far superior combat skills in their brief confrontation. But Monoma was still absent. And that raised Tokoyami's apprehensions. If Monoma was out there waiting for his partner, entrusting Kirishima to secure their victory, then why did that flicker of worry mar Kirishima's face? There shouldn't be any danger for him when facing Tokoyami. Kirishima's growing enthusiasm, marked by increasingly exuberant praise for well-placed hits, seemed to suggest so. Just as he was on the verge of making a break for it, returning to the clearing, the sound of heavy footsteps reached his ears, concurrent with Kirishima's battle cry, which abruptly ceased upon the same sound registering in his ears. The footsteps drew closer, carrying a sense of urgency, as though their source was hastening away. Tokoyami felt a surge of near relief, concluding that the girl must have managed to elude Monoma and make her escape. Positioning himself defensively, Tokoyami turned to the side. To his right stood Kirishima, his gaze locked onto the man-made trail they'd left behind. The footsteps approached, hastened, and Tokoyami found himself almost sighing with relief as he surmised that the girl had indeed evaded Monoma's clutches. It was Monoma. Monoma sprinted past a surprised Tokoyami, his focus unwaveringly fixed on Kirishima. The blonde figure was coated in dirt as though he'd taken a tumble through mud, his clothes torn with apparent claw marks etched across them. A panicked expression adorned his face as he raced toward his partner. "Abort," he blurted, and Kirishima didn't require a second prompt. Abandoning the skirmish, he hastened after Monoma, who was already departing. Tokoyami remained rooted in his spot, a mixture of confusion and surprise lingering within him. "What was that?" Dark Shadow voiced, frustration tainting its words. The entity was far from pleased that their adversary had abruptly fled, leaving the engagement unresolved. Another set of footsteps reached his ears, and although he had a vague inkling of whose they might be, he hesitated to accept it. Had he misjudged her entirely? Did she possess some form of martial training or perhaps an unconventional weapon? Or was her quirk vastly different from his initial assumption? Emerging from the undergrowth, Komori stepped into view, her appearance remarkably unscathed. "There you are," she exclaimed with genuine delight, her expression reflecting her relief to find him free from apparent injuries. Tokoyami had an array of certainties in his life. He was certain that birds laid eggs, he was certain that being engulfed in flames was agonizing, he was certain that he disliked the taste of alcohol. Yet, this girl posed an enigma that defied his categorizations. "Are we there yet?" Tetsu's voice emitted a childish whine, his feet surely throbbing with exhaustion by now. The sprint had begun once Mashireo seemingly sensed Komori's location, a feeling that seemed to affect him more than anyone else. While Mashireo appeared reluctant to slow down, he eventually did so, prompted by Uraraka's imploring eyes, despite her insistence that she could continue. "Almost." Mashireo exhaled in response. Ochako's feet screamed in agony. Her meager stamina felt like it was on the brink of collapse. Tetsu, seemingly less worse for wear, albeit with a slightly hunched posture, appeared poised to dash again. Meanwhile, she was almost tempted to ask to be carried, her eyes half shut as she trudged along, utterly fatigued. "Right there." Mashireo's voice boomed, and he promptly sprinted ahead, with Tetsu hot on his heels and Uraraka joining in reluctantly. When Mashireo leapt into a sizable bush, both Uraraka and Tetsu halted, uncertain whether to follow suit. "Found you," his triumphant shout echoed from the foliage, followed by laughter. Tetsu exchanged a look with Uraraka, who could only shrug in bewilderment. As Tokoyami emerged from his concealment behind a tree, their suspicions were laid to rest, it seemed they were not facing adversaries. Minutes later, after introductions and Ochako's comment on Komori's cuteness, which she fervently denied, only to receive mutual agreement from Tetsu and Ojiro, they finally had the opportunity to recount their own side of the ordeal. "All of this felt utterly unnecessary," Mashireo uttered, a touch of whining exhaustion in his tone. "I'd say, meeting me made it all worthwhile." Tetsu chimed in, laughing heartily at Mashireo's quizzical expression. "I think so too, without you I would probably still be with Kendo's team, so thank you." Uraraka adding her own endorsement. "I guess it wasn't entirely terrible," Mashireo mused, but then the ground began to tremble, causing all of them to tumble, desperately clutching onto anything for support. "What's happening?" Komori's voice quivered as she lay sprawled on the ground, struggling to quell her rising panic. "Dark Shadow." Tokoyami's command pierced the air as he fought to maintain his balance. Dark Shadow emerged and shot above the tree canopy, scanning the surroundings. "Holy shit." In the distance where the city area lay, a colossal skyscraper teetered and then toppled, triggering a domino effect that sent another tower crashing down in its wake. They exchanged silent, horrified glances, their shock reverberating through the still air. They remained wordless until Komori spoke up, her gaze locked onto Mashireo, as if transmitting her thoughts through her eyes. "Was that the signal?" Kaminari groaned as he slowly emerged from his much-needed sleep. His back, arms, heck, everything hurt. Even blinking sent twinges of pain through him. Not that his brain had registered that yet. Where was he, anyway? "Well, look who's finally awake. I wasn't even sure you'd manage that before the exams ended," an elderly voice chimed in. The speaker was a petite small old woman but adorned with a white coat and carrying a clipboard, clear indicators that she was probably the nurse. Wait, did she say exams? Suddenly, the memories rushed back like a water balloon exploding against his mind, leaving him emotionally drenched. Did he actually say all those things? And did he really wallop that off-metal guy so hard his hands broke? Glancing down, he was relieved not to see his fingers twisted at odd angles. But a dull ache emanated from them. A sigh of relief escaped him involuntarily, catching the nurse's attention and prompting her to follow his gaze to his hands. This earned him an irritated huff and glare. You were pretty lucky, Sonny. No need for her to raise her voice. People generally didn't wake up in hospitals in the best mood, especially when their own recklessness put them there. She'd managed to get footage from the nurse bot and had seen his prior state before she patched him up. All those injuries? Self-inflicted. Instantly, he straightened up, the tension returning as if he'd forgotten the nurse was there. Any worse and I might not have been able to mend them back together, she added calmly, though it was a blatant lie. But just the color draining from the kid's face was enough of a sign that the message got across. Good. Anxiously, he glanced around, hands resting on his lap, careful not to move them. So, what now? He inquired with curiosity and uncertainty. What now? She sized him up. He was still sporting his sportswear, now a bit cleaner, thanks to the vacuum cleaner's best attempt at laundry. Bandages adorned his face, but overall, he looked mostly unscathed outwardly. Normally, if the injuries weren't as severe, you'd be on your way home. She gave him a look that made him wince. In your case, you'll be sticking around until you're on the mend. You're currently in UA's nurse office. With that, she walked off, presumably to tend to other patients. Denki let himself fall back onto the bed, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. He wished he could clench his fists, if only he knew whether it was safe to do so. Instead, he ground his teeth in frustration. Damn it. Manga wasn't exactly a poster child for violence. In fact, he was pretty much the opposite, a peace-loving guy. A lot of people could vouch for that. His quirk, while not designed for destruction, could still pack a punch if he smacked someone right into a wall with a perfectly timed BAM sound effect. But seriously, that last jump from him? That was a level of pain he hadn't signed up for. Even now, he had no idea how he managed to hit himself with his own quirk mid-jump. His mom would have called it an impressive achievement, for sure. His dad? Well, he'd just chalk it up to him being a dumbass. Not that his family's input really mattered at this point. Family dynamics wouldn't save him from the mess he was in right now. And that mess involved him getting relentlessly assaulted by a girl with vines for hair. Yeah, she was kind of hot, but she was also trying to tie him up like he was a gift wrap tutorial. And what was with her constant praying or chanting or whatever? It was getting on his last nerve. If she was gonna attack him with those vine things, the least she could do was look him in the eye while she did it. Not like he could show his discomfort, dude was still stuck running around like a damn monkey. Was this some kind of hidden camera prank show? Well, yeah, there were hidden cameras, but not the kind he was thinking. He almost wanted to accept it, the new reality of his life, perpetually running, jumping, rolling, and dodging. The park area they were fighting on had turned into a freaking battleground, like a field that had decided to tip over. All it needed were some plants and grapevines everywhere. Speaking of vines, how the heck did the vine-haired girl afford all those hair products with, well, that kind of hair? Or maybe she used garden products instead. Wait, did garden products even exist for hair? Man, this whole situation was straight up bizarre. The girl's side glare hit him like a ton of bricks, and it was as if she could smell the thoughts he hadn't even spoken out loud. Wait, did he really blurt out that whole hair products thing? Nah, that couldn't be right. He was a ninja at keeping quiet, a skill he'd honed during the thrilling years of middle school. Oh, but then there was his manga panel head. Manga never quite mastered the art of keeping his thoughts hidden from that head of his that was essentially a living manga panel. It was like his panel head had its own mind. The doc claimed the head was somehow organic and not paper. It did feel organic enough, with all the touching he received from curious classmates. Also, according to the doc, that was where his brain lived. Well, after little 6-year-old Manga got his first phone and Googled brain sizes and then compared it to his head size, he never quite trusted that doc again. And then, a slight tug at his feet. Oh, shoot. Swearing internally, he tried his best. Seriously, he was like the superhero of evading capture for the majority of the battle. Too bad it counted for zilch at the moment. In what felt like mere seconds, the girl's vines, under her tight control, had cocooned him, wrapping around everything except his head, which displayed a very unamused, sad face. Moral of the story? Trying to outmaneuver a girl with vine hair? Tougher than it sounds. See, now that your struggles are in vain, the girl, Ibara Shiozaki, asked coldly. For some reason, Manga's brain provided her name, and he couldn't help but feel that she was the one who was annoyed. He almost burst into laughter, so much so that his manga panel emoticon changed to a He was actively trying to silence himself, not wanting to worsen his already precarious situation. Listen up, girl. My team's gonna show up any minute now, and then you're in for a world of hurt. It was a complete lie, and he knew it. First off, they'd agreed on a plan, and secondly, he had no clue where the heck he was right now. This park certainly didn't fit the standard definition. Huge open-ass field would have been a much more accurate name. Much, much better. Not that it mattered much right now, given that the girl remained impassive to his attempts at intimidation. Fine, if she wanted to play it cool, he could play the same game for hours. 10 minutes later, he was thoroughly reconsidering his approach. Please, I'm sorry for calling you, Cactus Face. Please let me go, he whined, feeling suspended in the air for far too long, especially for someone who didn't have a flying quirk. But the cactus-headed girl simply ignored the comment, much like the thousands of other comments she'd probably heard before. No, she replied with a simple, cold denial. That prompted Manga to whine even louder. He could still hear explosions and battle cries in the distance, too far for comfort. Sadly, he couldn't move his head since someone had a death grip on his neck. If only those vines didn't have thorns, things might have been different. Stupid thorns. She already had strong vines, did they really need to be thorny as well? Alright, I give up. What the hell do you even want with me? Manga finally resigned himself, realizing he'd lost track of just how long he'd been hanging in the air. Hopefully not too long, he didn't want his teammates to start a missing persons report. But who was he kidding? They probably thought he'd been gone for ages, and he was still stuck with this girl. I do not like to repeat myself very often, she began, matter-of-factly as if explaining something to a 5-year-old, but since you seem to have sincerely forgotten my request, I shall reiterate once more, I seek companionship. Manga didn't quite grasp the implied insult in her words, so his emoticon just shifted to a slash. I already told you that I'm part of a team. And even if I wanted to leave, which I don't, I'd need my entire team to disband, he shouted angrily at the stronger female. Meanwhile, Shiozaki absorbed this information with a touch of annoyance that she chose to ignore. Several seconds of silence followed before Ibara's face morphed into a shocked expression. Ah, she uttered. What's with that expression? Are you an idiot? Manga couldn't help but retort. Manga's world suddenly plunged into darkness. What? I can't see. I'm blind, he screamed in sheer hysteria, struggling against his unseen captor. He felt himself being carried around like a piece of luggage. Silence was his only response. Let me go. He shouted again, though it was invisible, his emoticon changing in anger. She continued to ignore him, focusing on her path. It wasn't until she slowly halted, another realization dawning on her. Where is your team located? She asked, allowing his head to see the light of day again. Manga, gasping for air and taking deep breaths, turned his now angry gaze toward Ibara. Are you crazy? I could hardly breathe. Manga's words were far from the truth, and Ibara's patience with her future teammate was dwindling. I would very much appreciate no further use of such sinful acts, she said, with a touch of prayer in her voice. Sinful? Sinful? You're the one holding me hostage. Remind me who's the sinful one here. He shouted, two of the same emoticons raging inside his head. Shiozaki recoiled in shock. But I have been nothing but honest with you, she replied, her voice tinged with hurt and disbelief. What the hell is going on with you? He continued to struggle, wiggling his entire body in an attempt to escape her grasp. I can't read you at all. First, you're some stone-cold diva, and the next second, you're a hurt little girl. Pick one and stick with it. His voice reached octaves he didn't know he was capable of, and his volume was also a new record. Another hurt expression crossed Ibara's face, and she tried her best to hold back tears. Manga was left stunned into silence before the vines engulfed his head once more, prompting him to thrash around again. Finally, someone who doesn't seem to be too hard, a new voice chimed in, causing Manga to temporarily halt his thrashing to listen. Ibara turned her attention toward the voice, only to find two figures standing several meters behind her. One of them appeared rather ordinary, with brown hair and nothing particularly striking about his appearance. Well, except for that orange jacket and matching pants. What was that all about? The other figure, on the other hand, had a mutant quirk. 6 arms, a peculiarly shaped head that contributed to a rather frightening image, and a mask covering his mouth up to his nose. His muscular build only added to the impression of a raging beast, but his intelligent gleaming eyes were a stark contrast to his appearance. The plain boy lacked any headbands, while the mutant had one headband for each of his arms, neatly and tightly knotted. "Tsuburaba, do not judge our opponent by their appearance," scolded the mutant, which seemed to make the other boy back down slightly. "Sheesh, it's alright Shoji. I didn't mean it like that." The boy quickly defended himself against whatever claim Shoji had made. Shoji nodded before turning his attention to Ibara. "I wish we could meet under different circumstances, but..." He glanced around at the chaotic scene with many aspiring students battling each other. "We sadly don't have that luxury." Ibara knew exactly where this was going, and she was now completely focused on them. "Whoa, hold your horses, girl." Tsuburaba, the brown-haired teen, gestured with his hands, palms outwards in a back-away motion. "We really don't have to fight. You can just give us your headband, and then we'll be on our way. Otherwise, my friend here has to take it away from you." He motioned toward Shoji, who looked rather displeased but remained silent. Tsuburaba's expression briefly soured before he masked it with a smile. "So, what do you say? We win, you win, everybody wins without any violence." He made a "come on, take the deal" gesture, and Ibara was slightly impressed that he even knew what that was. Her vines extended once more, slithering along the ground like hungry snakes. "I'm sorry," she said, although there was no hint of remorse in her voice. Her once moist eyes were now dry, and her tone was sharp and cold as a knife. "But I must disappoint you." Her hair began to lift, aiming toward the two of them. Each vine string resembled a predator ready to pounce on its prey. "Too bad." Tsuburaba sighed, but before Ibara could react, he exhaled loudly. It was her cue to unleash her attack, sending her vines hurtling toward them with full force. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share and support the original writer. See you in the next video?